All right. Here we go. Why is everybody so happy? Everybody's so happy. It's like a conspiracy to just look happy in front of me. Everybody said, if you see David Feldman, just look happy. Look happy. These are just some of the stories I'll be covering. McDonald's has a child labor problem. Apparently, kids are insisting on cash and are no longer willing to accept their payments in Happy Meals. Meanwhile, Americans aren't making enough babies, or as McDonald's calls this, a labor shortage. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, says he doesn't want migrants voting. Spoiler alert, they're not. But don't worry, Speaker Johnson, once Donald Trump becomes president, nobody will be voting. You've heard of paying child support? Well, now Republicans want deadbeat dads to start paying fetus support. Yes, that's right, fetus support. Hey, don't be so quick to knock it. If Americans weren't willing to pay for someone who doesn't exist, there'd be no organized religion in this country. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas says he finds Washington disgusting. The feeling's mutual, Clarence. After years hosting his own talk show on WABC Radio, Rudy Giuliani has been fired because he refused to stop lying about the 2020 presidential election. Well, what did you think he was going to talk about, WABC, when you hired him? Makeup tips? All of a sudden, conservative talk radio is worried about the truth. Your number one program is Sean Hannity, who spreads lies like they're butter, and his audience is Chris Christie's morning coffee cake. That was a stretch. Melania makes it clear that she doesn't want her child to grow up to be like the rest of Donald Trump's sons. Melania, you do realize that the Trump sons never grew up? Don Jr. and Eric are still children, and judging by his diaper stench, Don Sr. is still a baby. Speaking of people who smell like a soiled diaper, Steve Bannon has officially exhausted all his appeals and will be heading off to jail. Bannon put out feelers on the inside to join an Aryan gang, but they told him he was even too much of a white nationalist for them. You know, I've been a civil libertarian my entire life, but Steve Bannon going to jail makes me think twice about the virtues of prison reform. Steve Bannon is such a pig. If I mailed him a cake with a file inside of it, he'd eat the cake and the file. Trump's number one supporter in the House, Troy Nehls, finds himself under a cloud of legal trouble as congressional investigators now say they have some questions about his ethics, like where are they? Israel's Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, turns his back on President Joe Biden and says, I'm prepared to finish this all by myself, which, if I'm not mistaken, are the exact same words Bibi spoke on his wedding night. And fighting intensifies in Ukraine because Speaker Mike Johnson waited 6 months to bring a foreign aid supplemental to the floor of the House for a vote. This is the mop-up for May 12th, 2024. Thank you for finding me. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Happy Mother's Day. If you're looking to waste your money on a Father's Day gift, check out my new store. I opened up I shouldn't have, but I did. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com. It's all garbage, seriously. Don't buy anything. Just check out shopdavidfeldman.com because it's an interesting glimpse into how far my mental illness seems to be progressing. For example, I'm actually selling these for Father's Day. It's a coffee mug that says world's creepiest stepdad. I don't expect anyone to buy it. I'm just working out my issues. Check out my store, shopdavidfeldman.com, shopdavidfeldman.com. By the way, this is why I've never made it. Just when things start to go a little too well, I self-destruct and try my hand at garbage like this. Seriously, if you like this show, don't buy something like this. World's Creepiest Stepdad. It's if you buy this over at shopdavidfeldmanshow.com, it will make me even sicker in the head, and I'll start thinking I can start making money doing this. Nobody needs a World's Creepiest Stepdad coffee mug. I feel bad for stepdads on Father's Day, so I made this. But do not go to shopdavidfeldman.com. If one person buys this, I'll get distracted and it'll affect the show. So don't buy a World's Creepiest Stepdad coffee mug. You don't need one. Who doesn't love McDonald's? Other than everyone on the planet 5 minutes after they eat there. Go ahead, ask someone walking out of McDonald's this question. Walk up to them and say, looking back on your life, what's your biggest regret? And they'll say, I don't know about my life, but looking back on my last 5 minutes, I'll go with the Big Mac that's about to be staining these white pants and my car seat. McDonald's is like going to the donkey show in Juarez, Mexico. It only seems like a good idea on your way in. Has anyone ever walked out of a McDonald's and said, that was a wise decision? No. McDonald's is pornography. It's lust. It's something you crave, and then afterwards you feel disgusted with yourself, which is why I never eat at McDonald's, because I'm already disgusted with myself. Anyway, McDonald's has come under criticism of late for how expensive it's gotten. I'm not talking about how expensive it's gotten for American taxpayers. You know, the billions McDonald's costs all of us each year because of the drain on Medicaid and Medicare from the obesity, heart disease, and cancer that food at McDonald's is responsible for. And I'm not saying McDonald's has gotten expensive for all of us because they pay their workers so little, and we end up subsidizing the company by providing food stamps for the working poor who are employed by McDonald's. I am talking about the actual cost of a meal at McDonald's. It's gotten too expensive, and people are blaming Joe Biden for that, when we should be thanking Joe Biden for that. Although I have no idea why Joe Biden should be blamed for the high prices at McDonald's. If anyone's responsible for the high costs of Big Macs, blame that orange spray-tanned turd Donald Trump for hoarding all of them in his big fat belly. McDonald's is why more than half this country is clinically obese. So I'm glad McDonald's has gotten too expensive. You could say when it comes to McDonald's, inflation is preventing inflation. We should tax McDonald's like we do cigarettes. Anyway, the mass murderers who run McDonald's are worried now that Americans are going to stop poisoning themselves if the biohazard they mistakenly refer to as food gets too expensive. So they're bringing back the $5 value meal at McDonald's. And here's what it includes. For just $5 at all participating McDonald's, you can get, for $5, you get stomach cancer, type 2 diabetes, bowel cancer, heart disease, morbid obesity, and for just an extra $1, they'll supersize your butt cancer. The monsters who run McDonald's are just as bad as the Mexican drug cartels. You do know they pump their food with the perfect blend of fat, salt, sugar, and air, so that no matter how much you eat, you're never satisfied. It's not dissimilar to cocaine, especially since cocaine is cut with baby laxative, giving it pretty much the same effect as a quarter pounder. This is really nasty, nasty stuff. McDonald's. It's really nasty. Food scientists invented anti-nutrition that leaves you hungrier after you eat it. And we all know this. Now, we could tax McDonald's into oblivion or force it to stop destroying our rainforests by making it only serve plant-based protein. But that would be the ethical thing to do, the healthy thing to do, the righteous thing to do, and therefore un-American. But people who own stock in McDonald's have come down with a sudden case of social responsibility last week, because that's what McDonald's is all about. Social responsibility. Walk into any McDonald's restroom at any time of the day, and the first thing that comes to mind is, the people who eat and work at McDonald's really want to leave the world a better place than they found it. Whenever I walk into a McDonald's restroom, that's the first thing I think. Everybody, the customer, the people who work there, the executives, judging by this bathroom, everyone associated with McDonald's really wants to leave the world a better place than they found it. According to investigative reporting done by the Washington Post, in the past decade, McDonald's franchises have been caught 2,300 times violating child labor laws. Back in January, the Washington Post wrote that McDonald's has been caught violating 90-year-old labor laws by hiring children under the age of 13, often to work dangerous equipment like the fryer, which is almost as dangerous as eating some of that shit. 13-year-old kids working for McDonald's. Federal law prohibits fast food restaurants from working anyone under the age of 16 past 7 p.m., and these kids, 13-year-old kids, are not allowed to work for more than 3 hours on school nights. But, as is always the case with corporate America, break the law, wait till you get caught, apologize, insist these workplace violations run counter to our company's core mission statement, pay a small fine, promise never to do it again, and then do it again. The Washington Post says the Biden administration is trying to crack down on child labor violations at McDonald's, but the number of investigators looking into child labor violations at the Labor Department is now at an all-time low. Why? Because of tax cuts. And that's the virtuous cycle of tax cuts for the wealthy. Rich corporations, you cut their taxes so they get to keep more money, and you've cut their taxes, which means the government is forced to cut back on child labor investigators, so the rich get to keep even more of their money. This is what Republicans mean when they talk about getting the evil government out of our lives. Without the evil government, McDonald's can set the American labor movement back 150 years. Now, last Tuesday, the SOC Investment Group, which handles pensions for labor unions, wrote a letter on behalf of money managers who control nearly $2.2 trillion in assets, and some of which is stock in fast food companies. The letter, delivered to the board of directors of McDonald's on Tuesday, demanded the company show zero tolerance for child labor. The letter also warned that McDonald's may be violating the human rights of its workers, and McDonald's said, refresh my memory, is that a good thing or a bad thing? 28 states in the past 3 years have either passed or introduced new laws that ease the burden on employers who want to hire children to work longer hours, performing more dangerous tasks without permission from their parents. All reminiscent of 19th century America, where kids went to work instead of school to support their families, or as Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee calls that, the good old days. 13-year-old kids should not be working. But Sarah Huckabee, the governor of Arkansas, says they need to work to support their families. And whose fault is that, Sarah Huckabee? If Arkansas weren't a right-to-work state, there would be unions on the ground demanding parents are paid high enough wages so their kids don't have to work. If Arkansas had a social safety net, 13-year-old kids could play Little League instead of chipping in on the rent. But people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders believe school isn't for everyone. And judging by everything that comes out of her mouth, that would include Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I'm pretty sure school wasn't for her. So it should come as no surprise that, according to the Wall Street Journal, the number of children born in America has hit a record low. We have the lowest fertility rate since 1930, when America first began keeping track. America is undergoing a population implosion. And while that's probably good for the planet, it's not good for our economy or our social safety net. Our economy and our social safety net is a pyramid scheme where the old and the wealthy are propped up by the people who hate them the most, younger workers. Without the young people who we are screwing over, without them willing to do all the hard work, there's nobody to pay into Social Security or Medicare, and there's nobody to buy all the crap they don't need to keep our economy humming and our planet on fire. We are running out of young workers, which is precisely why they're getting younger and younger. There's a labor shortage. Women are not going into labor, so we have to put their kids to work because there aren't enough adults left to do it. I mean, we could accept migrants at the border, but that would make perfect economic sense. Why would we ever do that here in America? We have cities like Pittsburgh, states like Kansas, begging for these migrants. But Governor Greg Abbott of Texas puts them on buses to places like New York and Los Angeles that don't want them. They should want them. I live in New York, where commercial real estate is empty because this place is a ghost town. But it's more important that we hate and fear the most vulnerable people on the planet, homeless migrants, instead of saying, hey, you know what? We need these people. Europe, on the other hand, is down to 1.5 births per female, which is why they began accepting migrants roughly 10 years ago, way more than America did or does. We don't accept migrants. We don't accept immigrants. You might remember at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis, Germany's Angela Merkel recognized that her country needed these refugees to make up for Germany's shrinking population. For the first time in centuries, Germany's population was shrinking without anybody getting exterminated. Rich nations like Germany, they don't have kids. They find it better to import children. Look, I can't stress this enough. When a nation's population shrinks, its economy shrinks with it. Also, without younger workers, there's nobody paying into the social safety net to keep it afloat. So Germany wisely accepted the Syrian migrants, as did other European nations, not out of charity, out of self-interest. But the problem in Europe is migrants are not white and they don't speak the language. And this gives rise to nationalism where ignorant white supremacists fear their culture is slipping away from them. Now, maybe that's a problem in Europe that actually has a culture worth protecting. But here in America, does anyone honestly believe we have a culture worth preserving? I mean, other than the sons and daughters of the old Confederacy? Yes, of course. What are you talking about, David? We must save our embattled American culture. God forbid we start hearing more Shakira and less of Jason Aldean. But, there are some Americans who believe this. They vote for Trump. The most uncultured people on the planet worry their culture is being stripped of them. You can't lose something you never had. You have no culture. And of course, these Republicans complain migrants don't speak English properly, which could also be said of all the people who don't want the migrants living here. I read the comments from my MAGA listeners, and let's just say they have about as much command of the English language as Donald Trump does of his lower intestines. This is a fact, America. Without these migrants plugging the population holes, our nation will collapse. That's a fact. The migrant crisis is not a crisis for America. It's an opportunity. It's a crisis for the migrants. The migrant crisis is why they needed to come here in the first place. The migrant crisis is what they went through to get here. The migrant crisis is how they're treated once they arrive, but it's anything but a crisis for America. Migrants are a gift to the United States. We are undergoing a massive labor shortage here in America. And yes, that's a good thing for the union movement, but it's also resulting in 23 states relaxing their child labor laws. Because this so-called migrant crisis was never about protecting our jobs, our culture, or our language. It's never been about keeping wages high. It's always been about cruelty. It's always been about satisfying America's bloodlust by making the vulnerable suffer. If you want to understand Republican policy on this so-called migrant crisis, look no further than South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem bragging in her book about killing the family puppy and then the family goat. In her mind, the only thing she's guilty of is bragging that she did it, because this party, this Republican Party, is all about hurting the living and protecting the non-living, like fetuses. For example, Arizona Republicans are now trying to pass one of the toughest border bills in America. But when you read the bill, it's not about stopping migrants from coming here, because they know they need the migrants. If you read the new bill they're proposing, the entire purpose of the bill is to give their police officers more power to intimidate people of color. Republicans in Arizona, just like the ones in Texas and Florida, want their police to be able to round up migrants while terrorizing brown-skinned Americans, making brown-skinned Americans feel like second-class citizens, making it easier to pull over brown-skinned Americans, demanding they show proof that they're legal. That's what this is all about. I played you the clip of Florida State Representative Republican Rick Roth. I played it for you last year. You might remember last year, Ron DeSantis passed a law that terrorizes migrants. And what happened is Florida farms couldn't get anyone to work their fields. So Republican state legislator Rick Roth was caught on tape meeting with Hispanic leaders in Florida, urging them to get the word out that it's safe for migrants to come back to Florida. I played you the tape. He literally says, please explain to the migrants that these laws are just political. That's what he said. Explain to the migrants that, God, I'm getting so angry. Explain to the migrants that these laws are just political. This is what he said, that, quote, they're not intended to stop you from working here. He said, and I quote, these laws are only designed to scare you and give more power to the police. To give more power to the police. If Republicans were serious about stopping the flow of migrants, they would crack down on businesses that lure these migrants into our country. But undocumented migrants are the backbone of the American economy. The Republican Senate Committee in Arizona approved last week the Secure the Border Act. This bill, if passed, would make it against Arizona law for anyone to come into their state illegally. The bill would give the police more power to enforce American immigration law, which violates the U.S. Constitution, but who cares? Critics of the bill say it will legalize the racial profiling of dark-skinned people. Well, of course it will. That's why they're doing this. And here's the most important part. It got some pushback from the local Chamber of Commerce. So to make the bill more palatable, after the Chamber of Commerce complained about it, Republicans took out any provisions from the bill that penalizes employers who hire undocumented migrants, right? They're cracking down on migrants because they're taking work away from us. But to placate the Chamber of Commerce, they took out any provisions that penalize employers who hire undocumented migrants. That was why the Chamber of Commerce opposed the bill. It was unfair to the people who hired migrants. Now, remember Florida Republican Rick Roth meeting with the Hispanic leaders there, begging them to tell the migrants to come back? This ginned up migrant crisis has never been about stopping migrants from working here. It's always been about punishing them for being here. It's about putting American citizens who aren't white back on their heels and prone to unremitting police stops. It's about scapegoating. It's about finding someone to fear and someone to hate and to give our police more power over brown-skinned Americans. Speaker Mike Johnson, seen here in the most unenviable position of being downwind of Donald Trump, is all in on this phony migrant crisis. Again, Republicans in Arizona want to make it easy for police to harass brown-skinned Americans, but they don't want to make it easy to enforce E-Verify. They don't want to crack down on the farms, the slaughterhouses, or the construction firms that hire undocumented workers. Republicans want the undocumented workers, but they want them terrified. Undocumented workers don't unionize. They don't ask for time and a half. And you never read about ICE raiding slaughterhouses, construction sites, or farms because ICE wouldn't dare steal cheap labor from big business. No, the monsters who work for ICE stand in front of churches and schools and they look for the migrants when they're with their kids. They raid their homes, but they wouldn't dare raid a business. Now, I have some MAGA listeners who are going to send me anecdotal evidence of the monsters from ICE raiding one slaughterhouse. So what I want you to do is, send it to me and then shove it up your ass. ICE, the monsters of ICE should be against the law. ICE should be disbanded, and there's already talk of using ICE to patrol election precincts. When Donald Trump becomes president, God forbid, his palace guard, his Gestapo will be ICE. Mark my words. ICE wouldn't dare upset American business. They wouldn't upset our economic model by cracking down on the people who hire the migrants. What do you think an ICE raid would turn up at Mar-a-Lago, which is where Mike Johnson and Donald Trump worked up a key piece of legislation they unveiled last week to justify voter suppression? They claim they want to block undocumented immigrants from voting. This is the new thing that Trump and Johnson are pushing, the lie that undocumented migrants are voting in federal elections. So they proposed a new law last week that would prevent undocumented migrants from voting. The only problem is we don't need a law keeping undocumented immigrants from voting because they already can't and they don't. This is about voter suppression and perpetuating the lie that Joe Biden stole the 2020 election. Mike Johnson, a Trump supplicant, is a world-class election denier. He wrote the amicus brief where he got more than 100 Republican House members to sign. He got them to sign it back in 2020. And the amicus brief that he supposedly wrote, Liz Cheney says he didn't write it, but he claims to have written it. It was written to convince the Supreme Court the election in Pennsylvania was stolen by Joe Biden, and it was based on zero evidence. Part of the election lie is that millions of undocumented migrants poured over the border to vote for Hillary in 2016 and Biden in 2020. They were bussed in. This is the lie. They were bussed in by Democrats, and that's the only reason Trump lost the popular vote in both elections. Obviously, it's nonsense, but Trump keeps repeating this lie. Mike Johnson helps him repeat this lie, and that means enough low information voters, i.e. Republicans, believe the lie. And this is the entire purpose of this new legislation, to convince Americans we need to crack down on undocumented immigrants voting. And what the bill does, if passed, is it chills the Hispanic vote. Any Hispanic citizens who are afraid of the police, who might owe taxes, or have an outstanding bench warrant on a fix-it ticket, if this bill passes, they're not going to vote. This is designed to intimidate American citizens, brown-skinned American citizens. This is to intimidate them from voting. I owe spousal support. They're going to look me up. I better not vote. Trump, Johnson, and the Republicans now want the Department of Homeland Security enforcing election integrity. Why? Why do you want Homeland Security enforcing election integrity? Because Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, and the Republicans only want white people to vote. Now, Chris Krebs, the head of Homeland Security's Voter Integrity Division back in 2020, after the election, told Donald Trump that the 2020 presidential election was the most secure election in history. So Trump fired him. That's why the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is working right now behind the scenes to ensure that Trump's executive branch is staffed only with Trump loyalists like Mike Johnson. According to Ariana Figueroa, writing for Maryland Matters, the Heritage Foundation, they're behind Project 2025. They're staffing, they want to staff the entire executive branch with Trump loyalists. The Heritage Foundation, this far-right think tank, they examined the problem of undocumented migrants voting in federal elections. The Heritage Foundation pored over voting rolls going back 2 decades. And even though the Heritage Foundation really wanted to prove undocumented migrants were voting, they couldn't. They concluded there is absolutely no problem, zero problem with undocumented immigrants voting. The Heritage Foundation was only able to count 29 possible instances of undocumented migrants trying to vote over a 20-year period. 29 trying to vote. This is the Heritage Foundation saying this. You know, the Cato Institute, another Koch brothers-fueled think tank, conservative think tank, they try to prove the migrants were bringing fentanyl into this country. They really wanted to prove last year that the migrants were responsible for our fentanyl crisis. But the Cato Institute concluded, no, it's American citizens coming over the border legally who are responsible for like 90% of all the fentanyl entering our country. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the truth is. Governor Ron DeSantis in the debates after the Cato Institute study came out said when he's president and his border patrol sees migrants with fentanyl in their backpacks, he's going to order them to shoot to kill. And the audience cheered. It was a mic drop during the debates for Ron DeSantis. Because this isn't about the truth. This is about killing. This is about hatred, bloodlust. The truth doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that voter fraud doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because Republicans need it to exist. They have to will it into existence so they have a justification for voter suppression, for voter ID, to make it harder for people of color to vote. You need to create the illusion of an election stolen by Democrats, busing millions of migrants into this country to vote for Joe Biden. Zero evidence. Zero. There is no problem of undocumented migrants voting. Zero. Ask the Heritage Foundation. Zero evidence, which is why Republicans last week introduced this new bill that amends the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 by requiring all voters must first introduce proof of citizenship in order to vote. Voting in America, if Trump and Mike Johnson and the Republicans have their way, would be enforced by the Department of Homeland Security. Why? Because that's how you disenfranchise people of color. It's how you disenfranchise poor people. You make them jump through hoops to vote. You make them find their Social Security card, their passport, their birth certificate, all the things white, upper middle class or rich upper middle class voters are more likely to have at their disposal. Mike Johnson introduced this bill last week on the steps of the Capitol, and standing next to him were Stephen Miller and Cleta Mitchell. Stephen Miller, very big right now in the Trump campaign. He's writing Trump's speeches. You might remember Stephen Miller was the White House immigration czar during the first Trump administration, where he literally proposed that the Navy shoot migrants who were coming here on boats. And of course, Stephen Miller devised the family separation policy. Cleta Mitchell, she was on the steps of the Capitol as Mike Johnson unveiled this bill that he worked on with Donald Trump, making it impossible for undocumented Americans to vote. Cleta Mitchell was on the steps. Cleta Mitchell was one of Trump's attorneys who tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The Fulton County grand jury, which prepared the RICO trial down there, that grand jury recommended indicting Cleta Mitchell, but Fani Willis declined the charges. Even though Cleta Mitchell helped set up the call between Donald Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State, where Trump famously said, "Fellas, I just need you to find me 11,780 votes." She set up the call, and she was on the call. And she was on the steps promoting this new bill that talks about election integrity, when the Fulton County grand jury said she should be indicted for election interference. Look, there are people who either game the voting system or they accidentally violate it, but they all get caught. And the people who game it and get caught always turn out to be Republicans. Projection. Mark Meadows, Trump's White House chief of staff, was registered to vote in 3 states. He claimed to live in a mobile home in North Carolina, so he could vote there, but he didn't live there. Steve Bannon was caught being registered in both New York and Florida. Tiffany Trump was registered to vote in Pennsylvania and New York. Sean Spicer, remember him, Trump's first press secretary? He was registered to vote in both Rhode Island and Virginia. Jared Kushner was registered to vote in both New York and New Jersey. And Steve Mnuchin, Trump's Treasury Secretary, was registered to vote in New York and California by accident, and they got caught. They didn't do it intentionally. People move. But they use this as an example of people trying to vote twice. No, you get caught. You can't do it. Republican congressman out of Georgia, Drew Ferguson, reportedly voted illegally 3 times by casting his ballot in a county he doesn't live in. He got caught, but Georgia Republicans decided not to prosecute. In Georgia, on Friday, the state Republican committee voted 146 to 24 to fire Brian K. Pritchard, its first vice chairman, after it was discovered Brian K. Pritchard voted illegally in Georgia 9 times. Pritchard is a radio talk show host down there. He's very active in the Republican Party. He pleaded guilty back in 2008 to forgery, writing bad checks. And under Georgia law, convicted felons on probation can't vote, but he voted anyway 9 times. Yes, it happens. Rarely. On rare instances, people vote illegally, or they are registered to vote in 2 or 3 separate states. Rarely. And what do all these stories I just told you have in common? Well, there are systems in place that catch them all. and they are all Republicans. There is no such thing as voter fraud. Undocumented migrants are not voting in federal elections. The entire Republican Party is built on nothing but lies. They are all, the people who run this party now are sociopaths, and they're going to get us killed. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Happy Mother's Day, and don't go to shopdavidfeldman.com. Do not go to shopdavidfeldman.com. Do not check out my store. Do not buy for Father's Day a world's creepiest stepdad coffee mug. It's not funny. I'm trying to do a serious show here. Don't encourage this kind of bad behavior. If you liked any of this nonsense, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter, leave a comment. I read all the good, I did this in 45 minutes. I'm trying to do more shows, but not 3-hour shows. So I brought this in under an hour. That means I'm going to do a show tomorrow. If you enjoyed any of this, please share this with your friends via social media or through a text message. Just copy and paste the link. That's the best way to help me. Thank you to Bob in the chat room, and I'm feeling better. It's good to be back. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.